Hello, it's August 1973, and this has just been released. Buffalo's Volcanic Rock. 50 years ago, one of the best proto-metal albums of all time was released. So it's a 50-year anniversary this year. Perfect time to talk about one of my all-time favorites. So this video is going to be discussing Buffalo, the Australian masters of gritty heavy psych, and Volcanic Rock, their masterpiece. What I'm going to do is go over the album and talk a little bit about the band and read my review of the album that I wrote back in 2018 and give a slideshow of pictures and everything. But first, I'm going to read a little bit out of the booklet here. It says, by the end of 1972, Australia's legendary progressive rock heavyweights Buffalo had established themselves as a prominent force on the local rock scene. The band's debut album, Dead Forever, had sold well enough, yet its true significance was rating as the very first Australian release on the prestigious Vertigo imprint, and it gained them valuable attention overseas. And the lineup had remained stable since their formation in August 1971. It had David Tice on vocals, John Baxter on guitar, Peter Wells on bass, Alan Milano on vocals, and Paul Balby on drums. John Baxter's guitar work on this album, thing of beauty. So, hats off to John Baxter. They were in a curious position when it came to their live appearances, with their local gigging schedule having dropped off considerably. So, despite Dead Forever being tremendous, having tremendous sales, they're now international standing despite the huge crowd they pulled earlier this year. Promoters just aren't booking them. So they just weren't getting booked in 1971 and 72. And some of the promoters were saying, Buffalo isn't profitable. Yeah, promoters, what do they know, right? Ha, promoters. I'm a promoter. We don't know anything. And it seems to have hung heavy on the band's collective minds because they almost split up before the year was over. Tice had actually joined a new band called Mr. Madness, being put together by 4 ex-members of the Sydney-based psych pop outfit Flake. But then the bosses at Buffalo's record label wanted them to support legendary British heavy metal demigods Black Sabbath. Yes, that's right. They were going to support Sabbath. And that kick-started things for our friends Buffalo. This was an opportunity too good to miss. Sabbath was one of the best and biggest bands of the big boys had ever been compared to favorably. Tice remembers finishing the support slots to Sabbath, rushing off stage, jumping into a waiting car and heading across town to fulfill his singing role with Mr. Madness. Dave Tice remembers the Black Sabbath supports as being really important shows. So, obviously, supporting Black Sabbath gave this band new life that they desperately needed. A Dead Forever had been out for a while, and we were on the same label as Black Sabbath, of course, Vertigo. There was some discussion about whether we were going to do it or not, and we decided to do it, and thankfully it was really good. I don't remember seeing Black Sabbath because I had to leave straight away to play with Mr. Madness, but the reception we got was exceptional. I've had people come up to me in recent years and said, "Oh, I remember when you guys supported Black Sabbath." And you blew them away, yes. I have no doubt that Buffalo, well, maybe didn't blow Sabbath away, but certainly I believe that they were just as good as Sabbath live. And of course, that is a matter of perspective, but it's nice to have people come up and say, that supporting Black Sabbath was a real highlight for me. John Baxter declares, we played the big crowds on both nights and we went over pretty well. Unfortunately, we never got to meet Sabbath. So they never got to meet Sabbath. But, very important for this band right there, and this juiced them up enough to record their masterpiece. So with the Spirits revitalized, their touring schedule picked up, and they scored another important support slot on the national package tour by British bands Slade, Status Quo, and Craven. That did the outdoor concert rounds during February. Now down to a streamlined four-piece lineup of Tice, Baxter, Wells, and new drummer Jimmy Economou. Hope I pronounced that. Okay. Buffalo plowed ahead with more determination than ever and commenced work on their second album at United Sound Studios. So that they started working on their masterpiece, Volcanic Rock. So, what did eventuate, however, is one of the band's greatest records and essentially the first stoner rock album ever issued in Australia, the blazing Volcanic Rock. Interestingly, the album was also issued on the old music cassette format, as listed in advertising from the time, due to the fact that Buffalo music was good party material in its day, of course. One can only imagine the scenario at various shindigs in the far reaches of Australia where the same level of intensity was made available via this much more portable medium. Whatever the case, the importance of Volcanic Rock can never be understated. This is the album that established the band's reputation for dispensing uncompromising heavy psych rock of monumental proportions. This is the album that continues to enthrall aficionados of the genre the world over. With the new album and its single Sunrise Come My Way out by August, the band was regularly headlining its own gigs around Sydney and interstate. The reviews of the album were positive. Buffalo is back, and that's good news for those who like their rock steamin' hot and raunchy, and Australian. It thumps, it bumps, it grinds, gut solid from go to woe. The music howls and screams all around, and over guitar and bass riffs. It's what you would expect from Buffalo, and that makes it easy to decide about the record. The production is good too. It's going to be compared to Black Sabbath, but what the hell, Australia needs a band like that anyway. Looks like the band also thinks that this is their best record. Wells says, I think the album is Volcanic Rock. I think the best album is Volcanic Rock. We just seem to capture a certain sound. It just seems to have survived the best. Generally speaking, just the style of playing and approach seems to make sense to me. So, just a little bit from the booklet here. There's more. Perk of buying this on CD is you get to read all about the band. Some really cool stories, and so I'm going to go ahead and start the video now. Thanks for listening, and enjoy this little presentation on Volcanic Rock. It's been a long time coming on Smod. Alright, let's get into it and talk about the Australian proto-rock geniuses, Buffalo. I'm sure most of you know Buffalo, but for those unfortunate souls who do not know this band, here is a good opportunity to change that, because if you're listening to this channel, well, this is one band you cannot afford to miss out on. They were formed in August 1971, and they had the founding mainstay David Tice on lead vocals. They also had Peter Wells on bass guitar. Now, Peter Wells was a very famous guitarist, and he was in the band Rose Tattoo from 1976 to 1983 after he was in Buffalo. So he was a pretty famous guitar player, as Rose Tattoo did have some success in the mainstream. He unfortunately passed away in 2006 from prostate cancer at the age of 58. Now, Buffalo put out their first album called Dead Forever in 1972, which was a good album, but the next year is when they put out their masterpiece, and this was called Volcanic Rock. Volcanic Rock. Now, if there was ever a title that fit an album, Volcanic Rock is it. I mean, that is just a perfect album title. One of my favorite album titles of all time. And the artwork is insane. You know, it's got this friggin' muscled naked guy holding a penis, basically. I don't even know what the thought was behind that, but it's pretty metal, you know, it looks pretty heavy metal. This album, Volcanic Rock, is, for my money, the best album of 1973. And 1973 was a great year for music. I mean, you had stuff like Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath by Black Sabbath that came out that year. You had Tyranny and Mutation by Blue Oyster Cult. Houses of the Holy by Led Zeppelin came out that year. Oh, you had Never Turn Your Back on a Friend, if everybody likes Budgie. So 1973 was a massive year for heavy rock, and I think Buffalo's Volcanic Rock was the best album of the bunch. So it kicks off with Sunrise Come My Way. It's a really nice psych-infused song, has some amazing guitar playing on it, which the whole album is filled with amazing guitar. And it has like this a very uplifting vibe to it, talking about the sunrise, and it really does feel like you're watching the sunrise, and the light is washing over you. So it's a pretty inspiring opening track. And the next track is just as inspiring, and it's probably the best song on the album, on a very strong album called Freedom. It's a 9-minute epic. Now this is just one of those songs that's like Free Bird or, Stairway to Heaven or, any of these defining songs for a band. And this is just one of those songs that builds and builds and builds and is really a true anthem of proto metal. So this was basically, one of the earliest of the really heavy proto stoner rock. I mean, it's really like one of the heaviest heavy psych proto of that time, other than some of the stuff that was coming out a couple years prior, like Sir Lord Baltimore. But Buffalo was definitely one of the heaviest, definitely the best band to come out of Australia. The album has only 6 tracks, but every song is amazing. There's not a single dud on the album, and it ends with Shylock, and Shylock is a really, really monstrous song, just really in your face. The whole album is just this gritty, macho, just the way heavy metal proto is supposed to sound. I don't know, it's just like when I listened to this album, I was like, this is where stoner rock came from. These guys were the grandfathers of the genre. And Volcanic Rock, from the title to the album artwork to the guitar playing and the gritty vocal work, all of it just sums up what heavy metal, and especially what early proto heavy psych and stoner is supposed to sound like. So this album really changed my life, and I've known it for probably 10 years now. Another one of the very big inspirations for me to do the channel. So Volcanic Rock cannot be skipped. I mean, you have to hear this album if you haven't. I did write a review of the album in my smod group back in 2018. One of the earliest reviews that I wrote in the group. It says, "Who here knows this long-lost classic? It's one of my favorite proto albums of all time. It's Volcanic Rock by Australia's Buffalo. It sounds exactly like the name implies. This really is Volcanic Rock." Released in 1973, Volcanic Rock was essentially the first stoner rock album to come out of Australia. It's pretty much one of the earliest stoner rock albums, period. It brilliantly mixes heavy metal with psychedelic flourishes and garage rock atmosphere. The vocal work is gritty and perfect for a heavy rock record. If you're a serious stoner rock fan, you really can't be without this in your collection. Just listen to Freedom, an absolute early stoner epic if there ever was one. There are many fantastic underground heavy rock records from the same period just waiting to be uncovered. Volcanic Rock remains one of the best of the bunch. Don't sleep on this one any longer, you fools. Check it out today. Favorite tracks are Sunshine Come My Way, Freedom, and Shylock. So Buffalo did not have a super long career. They were much like many of these early heavy metal stoner bands in the 70s. This band broke up in 1977, but before they released another good record called Only Want You For Your Body in 1974. So between 72 and 74 they released 3 different albums, and Only Want You For Your Body is not quite as good as Volcanic Rock, but it's still worthy of having. It's still got a bit of a gritty, heavy sound to it, but it doesn't have the really proto-psych influence stuff that Volcanic Rock had. So for stoner rock fans, Volcanic Rock is definitely the one to listen to. So this band was a pioneer in Australia's heavy metal and psychedelic rock movements. Unfortunately, just one of those bands that never really made it big, but they have a huge cult following to this day. There's many, many people who know this band and album, thankfully, probably thanks to the internet. So I just wanted to mention Buffalo because I've never talked about it on this channel, and this is one of the defining stoner rock, early stoner rock, heavy psych albums, so it absolutely has to be discussed here. Thanks for listening. Go listen to Volcanic Rock and all the other Buffalo albums. It's one of the earliest doom and stoner albums, so go check it out, and I'll talk to you later. Thanks for listening.